Right now, most players are attacking Garrison completely wrong. And if you hit this one specific setup, which is Ellanir and Kuma, you're not just losing the fight, you're actually getting farmed without even realizing it. What makes this even worse is that at the start it doesn't look strong at all, which is exactly why so many players fall into this trap. I tested this with real battle reports, not just theory, and what happens here is very different from what you expect from a normal Garrison. This setup doesn't just win fast, and that's exactly the reason most players misunderstanding how strong it actually is. Because believe it or not, in Call of Dragons, the Garrison fight is getting longer and longer. But I personally believe with this combo, Ellanir with Kuma, things first of all is going to start be way more faster, and second, we're going to start seeing some crazy reports. So first, let's understand Ellanir, because she doesn't behave like a typical burst hero that tries to win fights instantly. Instead, she scales over time, which means every few attack and counterattack, she keep adding more damage. And in Garrison situation where you're constantly being hit, this effect never really stops. And I think from here actually come the best Garrison hero in Call of Dragons right now, just because the scale. You're not even if you swarm a castle with Ellanir inside, it's going to be even more brutal for you. So I strongly believe with this scaling from the attacks and counterattacks, Ellanir is going to be brutal. Now imagine this situation where you're getting hit by multiple enemies at the same time, and normally this is where most Garrisons start to fall apart. But with Ellanir, the more pressure you're taking, the more value you actually get, and that completely changes how those fights is going to play out. And yes, we have seen Mogro, we have seen Kuma, we have seen Liquan, we have seen Goresh, we have seen so many heroes in the Garrison, but believe it or not, Ellanir is going to change everything. Now let's bring Kuma into the picture, because this is where the entire fight dynamics starts to change. Most players think Kuma is just dealing damage like any other hero, but that's actually not what he's doing, because his real strength comes from controlling HP. And again, I have seen, oh my god, my Kuma is melting these legions, but by melting, people think he's like Kuma is doing big damage, but in reality, just because he's draining the HP of the legions around him, the legions are not having a lot of HP, and even with normal counterattacks, Kuma is doing brutal damage, even though that this damage is not that big. What Kuma actually does is draining HP from the enemy and convert that into healing for your legion. And this creates a very strange situation where your HP is no longer down the way it should. Instead, it stabilizes, and in many cases it actually starts going up where your enemy continue attacking. Now when you combine Ellanir with Kuma, you start to see the real synergy, because Ellanir becomes stronger the longer the fight's lost, where Kuma is actively forcing the fight to last longer. And when you put those two things together, you create a situation where the fight becomes harder and harder for your opponent over time. Kuma is going to give you this sustainability, this extra HP. Ellanir is going to give you these stacks that are with crucial importance, so you do crazy amount of damage, bro. It's crazy amount of damage. And this is the part that most players completely miss, because this combo doesn't win at the start one fight. of one fight. It wins after your opponent already think they're winning, and that's exactly why it feels so confusing when you fight against it. You're thinking, okay, it's infantry, is not Goresh there to increase the attack's resistance and etc. But in the same time, you're having Ellanir that is reducing your attack at the end of the day. As the fight continues, Ellanir keeps stacking more damage, where Kuma keeps your legion alive, and over time this creates a massive advantage that becomes very difficult to overcome. When you have Ellanir with so many stacks, with max stacks, you have Kuma and you have many legions against your target, and your target is draining all of these legions, well, you're going to feel hopeless right there, bro. You're going to feel hopeless. It is what it is. Now watch this very carefully, because this is where the fight completely flips. The biggest mistake players make against this setup is that they're trying to swarm it, thinking that more pressure will break it faster. But the history is clear. You never swarm Garrison. You never do it. You're just going to... It doesn't matter, it's going to be Ellanir inside, or Kuma, or Goresh, or Magra, Zeta. You just don't do a swarm of the Garrison, especially if the account is over 100 million. It is what it is. But yeah, still I see people making this mistake, start doing swarms and trying to increase the pressure, but it end up not be that effective. And in reality, swarming actually make this combo stronger, because more enemy means more value from both Kuma and Ellanir at the same time. You know, Kuma is going to drain more HP, you know, he's draining the target, but right now he can drain also the surrounding targets or nearly legions. Same with Ellanir, she's also get this crazy boost from more legions on the battlefield. Now, if you don't have Kuma, one of the best alternatives you can use is Garwood, because he brings huge amount of healing and sustain to the Garrison. This is more like Roots of War thing that Garwood with Ellanir, but still, if you have Kuma, better is going to be with Kuma. But if you want to use Garwood Ellanir is also going to serve very nicely. With Garwood, your legions become extremely difficult to be killed, and that's allow Ellanir to keep scaling damage over time in very similar way. This is how it's done, especially if you have more troops inside. Garwood and Ellanir, you're going to just allow Ellanir to scale up way more faster, and Garwood is going to keep the sustain of the legion. So Ellanir with Kuma is not just strong, it's one of the most underrated Garrison combination right now. And if players don't adapt, this could easily become part of new meta. Let me know what you think about this Ellanir with Kuma. Do you have experience fighting against this legion? And in general, your opinion over the new heroes. If you go that far in this video, don't forget to hit one like, also subscribe for more Call of Dragons content. I wish you a great day, and see you in the next video.